that first solo T-38 picture of me on a little tram coming back from the airplane. My hair's glued to my face, and it's, I'm looking off in the distance and they're taking a picture. Now, Connie had it made. I think she had a air dryer in every airplane. She took the best pictures of anybody. And I think the secret got out later, but she always had a hair dryer and she wouldn't let them take pictures until she was ready. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that was the rumor.
Okay, welcome to our Zoom interview. We're interviewing the first nine of the 10 female pilots that graduated undergraduate pilot training at for the Air Force. We'll go ahead and get started. What did it mean to you to be part of the first class of undergraduate pilot training to include women?
It meant that I might be able to pursue the goal that I've had since I was 12 and later since 1969. When the man landed on the moon, I wanted to be an astronaut. A little brief history, my mother and I went in to see the high school counselor, and the high school counselor I thought would narrow my career options. And instead he said, she can do anything. So I took him at his word and I made big plans. Okay, they've changed over the years, but if you don't dream big, you don't get very far. That's all part of that. So to be selected for the first pilot class was more of a, oh, good, now I can move on. I can check that box and get it done and move on to the next thing that I knew I had to do to even get near being an astronaut. I had a whole list. First, you had to get a degree in engineering. Well, the closest thing my mother would let me go to school was a degree in physics. So I got a degree in physics. Okay, then you had to be a pilot. You had to be a fighter pilot, actually, high-speed airplanes, not cargo. So there were limitations to most of the astronauts then had those requirements. I looked them up. I wrote them all down and I was attempting to do that. So getting accepted at the first pilot training class was just a check mark off my list, essentially.
Did you have flying experience before you went to UPT?
That's another story, yeah. My father signed the education loans that I had. So, and one day I was taking flying lessons and I did not tell my parents at Jimmy Stewart Airfield in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And one day I came home from working in the physics lab and my mother said, "You can't fly today, the airplane's broken, go to your room." It was one sentence. Okay, so I was up in my room when my father came up the stairs. Now, my father was an Air Force radio operator in WW2. And so he came up the stairs and when he got to my room, his face was a grin, a smile wide from ear to ear. And he essentially said, "It's your loans. You can do with the money what you want to, but your mother wants enough life insurance to bury you on." So I had to get life insurance. And by that time, that took a big chunk out of flying money out. So essentially closed the book on flying and said the next time the Air Force will pay for it. And then continued to bug my Air Force recruiter for 3 years until I got in. So yes, that's that's how I got started.
How do you feel about having your story featured in the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force?
Honestly, it's kind of ho-hum. I wrote that down because it's been 43 years since, and you're finally getting around to, and our memories get a little soft here when we get older. So I was going, why didn't they ask like 2 years out of pilot training when you had a better memory of all that stuff? But I'm glad. I'm hoping at some point in life might affect somebody's career choices. you know, as far as they get a little clingy when they hear that you're a woman pilot, because they think, oh, wow, you know, I don't know sometimes what they think sometimes. To me, I just did what I wanted to do. So
When museum visitors, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I can't interpret what the others think, you know, so if it helps them, fine. You know, that's the way I look at it.
When museum visitors see your exhibit, what do you hope they will learn from your experience?
To not limit themselves, to not let others limit themselves, let others limit them. Okay. And I wrote a quote down because to me, it's a pretty good one. It's from Seneca. It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult. So if you have a dream, shoot for it. Write down everything you think that dream requires to be accomplished and go piece by piece. And then if some reason those dreams change, own it. Don't blame other people. Own it, as it did for me. So
that's awesome. What inspired you to join the Air Force?
Well, like I said, my father was an Army Air Corps radio operator, a radio repairman, actually. And so I bugged my recruiter for 3 years to let me, I was a farm girl. Okay, I grew up on a farm. There's no money there for going out and getting all your pilot licenses and doing all that stuff. It's just not there. So you have to find a method to get there, and the Air Force was my method. So bugged him for 3 years. When are they going to have women pilots? When are they going to have women pilots? And he flat told me they will never have women pilots as long as you're in the Air Force. And so when when I saw the ad, the paper to looking for women pilots when I was at Lowry Air Force Base, I wrote him shortly after I was accepted. So I'll keep that one for a later story here. I think one of your questions has that. Let's see if that's, rural America, service to the Air Force was a good choice. And he kept telling me, oh, go to the Navy. The Navy has women pilots. I said, I didn't want to be a sub chaser. I want to fly airplanes. And the Air Force, the service that flies airplanes is the U.S. Air Force. So that's what we argued back and forth about for 3 years.
What did you do in the Air Force before you became a pilot?
I was the chief of maintenance for a communications squadron at Lowry Air Force Base. Went to Keesler for communications training and went there. So,
what did your family think about your choice to pursue the aviation career field?
well, like I said, my dad was grinning from ear to ear. Okay, so he was really happy about it because I think he secretly wanted to be a pilot. He would take us kids out to an airport we grew up in Lafayette, Louisiana, part of our time. And he would take the kids out to get them away from the house for a little while. And we watched airplanes take off and land at a local airport. So we actually grew up in New Iberia, so that's just a little south of Lafayette, but that might have been the only airport there was. I'm not sure. We left Louisiana when I was 9, so that's how we became interested in flying. It looked good. Looked like a lot of fun. So my inspiration to join was because that was a little check mark I could make.
Before UPT opened to women, had you thought about becoming a pilot?
Oh yes, I probably had about 12 hours of flying in a small airplane before I couldn't afford it anymore, with college and everything else, getting it done. So it was part of the goal. You had to become a pilot to become an astronaut. So you definitely thought about it.
So because you couldn't fly combat pilot combat aircraft. Is that why you didn't pursue further becoming an astronaut?
No, there was a numerous things that kind of changed my mindset at the time. I think I'm trying to remember. It's 1983 was when the Explorer or the shuttle blew up, I think. But 86, my husband says. He's got a memory like a steel trap.
No, don't quote me on that.
But he thinks that's when it was. In any case, it was shortly after I'd gotten out of the Air Force. I'd already decided not to become an astronaut prior to that. I did something really silly for a woman. I fell in love with some guy. Okay. And we got separated via the Air Force. And so that didn't work out. So I was a little bummed about that. Went to Air Force pilot train. I actually got assigned to T-38 training at one point, but because my height of my body is mostly in my legs and not in my torso, I could not put the back seat of the T-38 up high enough to land the airplane on brick one. And I was used to landing a DC-9 or a C-9 airback 2,000 foot down the runway. So after those flashing failure lights, because they didn't want me teaching students that, I went to 141s and graduated near the top of the class. So, you know, you put those flashing failure lights out, then you realize you're limited now. So I even visited Edwards Air Force Base, took a look around and applied once. I applied and got accepted in the first round, but there's like 3 rounds, and they wanted to see me get another degree in something scientific. And I just didn't have it in me about that time. So as it turned out with the accident later, it was probably a good decision.
May I ask what kind of accident?
Well, when the shuttle exploded in
Oh, of course.
86, you know, I wouldn't have gotten into space anyway, you know, so.
You are an inspiration to many women who joined the Air Force and became pilots. What women inspired you to break barriers and be part of the first class of undergraduate pilot training to include women?
I never thought of it as breaking barriers. To me, it was making decisions to get what I wanted, which was to become an astronaut. Okay, so I didn't think of it as breaking barriers, but I almost didn't apply to pilot training. But I had a good friend named Major Marjorie Morningstar, and I went to her with the ad in the paper, and I said, "What do you think?" I said, "I think I've got like a little astigmatism in my right eye or something." And she said, "Okay, Chris, what's the worst that could happen?" I said, "The worst that could happen is I wouldn't get accepted." It goes, "And what's the best that would happen?" "Well, I'd get accepted and I'd continue on with what I wanted to do." And she said, "Well, you just answered your question." So in essence, my thought process at the time was I was enjoying the Air Force. I loved the Air Force. They had me assigned to a det in Turkey to be the commander of that. So I said, I'd probably go to Turkey and, you know, do that. Probably put in 20 years, you know, but even that changed later. But so that was the worst that could happen. So.
Why did you almost not apply? It was something that you wanted for so long.
Well, they were looking at 20/20 vision, and you know, and I knew what the requirements were to be a pilot in the Air Force, and so, you know, do I have 20/20? Do I have a little astigmatism? What do I have? You know, and so turned out, you know, when they tested me, it was 20/20. So it's all a matter of getting tested at the right time, you know. But sometimes. I found out later that about a third of those academy guys that were in our class had problems with their eyesight and were doing all kinds of things to cheat.
Sadly, Susan Rogers passed away in 1992. How would you describe her?
Susan was pretty quiet girl. She had a pretty smile. She and I actually lived off base during pilot training. We were the only two that did that. Okay, so we had our own little townhome there in let's see, it was just down the road from Williams Air Force Base. So we had the advantage of being outside the Air Force regiment with room checks and all that kind of stuff. So Susan and I just like to have fun sometimes, and she worked hard studying. I mean, she was always studying, and I would get out and do other things because I didn't think the academics was all that difficult because of my physics degree, I think. So in that aspect, she got a little mad at me sometimes because I wasn't studying too much. So that was her thing. But we also went to DC-9 school together, okay, and flew DC-9s together. So she was a good friend for the first few years of that after pilot training. But to really know her, she was quiet. We liked to socialize. We both liked socializing, and the only people who we could even socialize at UPT was the men who came back from Vietnam as POWs. They were in a group by themselves, and they were older than us, and unlike the classmates who were all younger than us. So we could go to the old club and dance and have fun and just let our hair down, so to speak. So, and we did. But as far as really knowing her, she got married while we were at Schott, and like I said, she's pretty quiet overall.
How long did you serve in the Air Force, and what rank were you when you retired or separated?
10 years, 5 months, 10 days in the regular Air Force, and a year in reserves. And I was a captain.
Why did you choose to separate?
I had a little help getting that decision made, actually. I wanted to go to Ramstein Air Force Base to fly anything over in Germany. And they said no. I said, you know, if you gave me that, my family's from there, I'd probably be happy and stay for 20. And the career advisor, some career advisor she said, oh, we don't care if you're happy or not. I said, oh, well, then let me speak to someone who does. And she goes, well, who's that? And I said, me. And I promptly hung up. So I put my papers in that within a day from that conversation. I felt that when they wanted to send me to a command post in Kunsan, Korea. Okay, but I'm sorry, but I've already spent 3 years in the communications field. I don't need a rated sub. I want to fly airplanes. And that was the whole conversation with this career advisor. So when that happened, it just so happened that it was in November of 83, October of 83 is when they decided to that. And I got out November 15th of 1983 and was working for Continental on November 20th, 1983. So.
How many years did you spend with Continental?
Well, they merged with United. So I retired in 2015 from the combination there, the merger.
Okay. It's a long career. What were some of your most memorable assignments or missions? Are there any significant events from your career you would like to share?
Yes. The most memorable one was actually carrying a 38 pistol on a mission down to Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico. We were picking up the survivors of the Jonestown incident. there were two people, one had got shot and the other one had had a heart attack because his wife got shot. Now, just who they were, I'm not sure. I've tried to find out, but it was a little, I could never find out anyway. Long story short, it was the only time I carried a 38 pistol on a job where I had to actually work as a guard part-time once we got down there, because we were looking at the grass and with our gun on our hip. That was the only time I carried a weapon. So that was pretty memorable. We got them back though.
Why do you think it took so long for the Air Force to start training female pilots, since WASP had proven women's ability during World War II?
I'm thinking it was a social issue at that time. Okay, it was a barrier that was imposed. Women did prove that women can fly airplanes. That wasn't the issue. I just think that it was a man's domain at the time, the Air Force pilot program. And shoot, you look at some of the license tags of the academy guys that we were in pilot training with, and some of them were LCWBs. And if you don't know what that stands for, that stands for last class with balls. Okay, so we had an opportunity to design the patch on our shoulder, and we wanted to be the FCWBs, okay, first class with boobs. That didn't go over too well. So the guys came up with something about, at the time, there was a comedy or a character, and they had a T-38 going upside down to the runway. What, me worry? It was kind of like one of those cartoon characters, but so it was in the system, okay. But boys will be boys, as Reagan said, you know. I don't think it was so much a time issue, it's just a social issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think pilot training was more difficult because of your gender?
Actually, I think it was easier, and I'll tell you what my interpretation of that question was. Pilot training is pilot training. You're in the class with the guys, it's all the same stuff, okay? When you go up in the airplane, you're by yourself and an instructor. Now, Susan and I used to spend some time with one of the instructors, and he once told us, because we were over there at his house complaining about why are the grading systems, why can't you get excellent, or you get you get a lot of normal progression, normal right middle of the road write-ups, okay? Why don't we get more excellence? And he said, well, here's the story, okay? An excellent has to be briefed to the Pentagon, and a bust has to be briefed to the Pentagon. So you're going to be middle of the road the whole time you're here, unless you're one of the class commanders or one of the, or you just blew it that day, you know, and everybody can have a bad day. So that was one of the issues in pilot training. And I thought that they were a little lenient on us, quite frankly, because we were the first class. The second class took a hit. 4 people left that class. So they called them self-eliminations, but I think there might have been some retribution for the first class, but I'm just guessing. You know, that's just how life works sometimes. Yeah, so easier? No, I don't think so, but I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun, actually, sometimes. That was Major Michael Mormon, who I used to fly with once in a while in the Tweet. Here's another funny story. Okay, there's landmarks that you fly over, and you make a turn over certain aspects of it. And one of them is 2 mountain peaks that were sitting there, and we had to turn left to go out to the training area. So unbeknownst to us women, the guys had a different name for those 2 mountain peaks than we did, okay? And so I'm flying with Mike that time, Mike Mormon, and he goes, well, where do you make your turn? I said, I go over to these, I go over to Peaks and I hang a left. And he goes, who said that? Who told you that's what they're called? I said, I know, I heard it somewhere, you know. He got kind of irritated because women weren't supposed to know the nicknames of some of the landmarks that the guys called them, you know. In fact, I think I probably got that from a POW. They were a lot nicer to us the whole time we were there, you know, because shoot, they just came out of the prison, you know. They're glad to be away from that place. So they were a lot more fun. Not so regimented. I don't know how many times Mike asked me, where's my military bearing? So one day I went out and got a steel metal ball bearing and I put it in my pocket. Next time he asked me, I said, here it is, Mike. Or Major, depending on the atmosphere at the time. You know, if there were other people around, it was Major Mormon. Otherwise, it was Mike.
Did you feel instructors were harder on the female UPT students?
I think it goes along with the thing with earlier being easier or harder. I think some of them were doing things they didn't want to do. Okay, I don't think socially they probably thought it was weird that women wanted to be pilots. Okay, in that day and age, when we were at the little airplanes at Randolph, you know, at Hondo Air Force Base. They were at the little Hondo place, and we were playing pool one day, and some guys walked in and said we stole their slots. Okay, so you can imagine they're mad. They were mad because there were only a certain amount of slots, and in 1976, with Vietnam already winding down and out, the slots for male pilots was really down. So they felt that us 10 women stole their slots. So we tried to tell them we didn't steal their slots. They made slots especially just for us. So we didn't steal their slots. So, but it still didn't go over too well. Yeah. So you can imagine if they felt that way at Hondo, they also felt that way within the categories. And I told you about the license plates of some of those guys. So yeah. Male domain.
Do you ever feel the standards or requirements were modified to help women pass UPT?
I think so, and and in some cases they should be. For example, the height difference and where it is. Okay, no, but that's an equipment problem in essence. So I'm pretty sure they probably now have seats that go up a little higher in different airplanes. You know, as far as a physical thing, but as far as the standards, if I was without denoting who, I would think there'd be one or two of our group that would not have made it in a normal situation. Okay, and there's one or two that probably got better grades than they probably only because of their rank or whatever. Okay, but I think the standards were tweaked for those situations because they had to have some good things show up, and they had to, you know, etc. That's just my opinion. It's not relevant in some cases because it didn't matter. It didn't affect me. I just enjoyed the heck out of it. However, when anybody asks, how do you like pilot training? My standard answer is, well, I know I'm going to heaven because I've already spent my year in hell. You know, so I used it in that terminology, just because of the where's your military bearing? You know, we were all been in the Air Force for a while, we knew that it wasn't as regimented as these academy guys just got out of it, and they're still, you know, yes sir, no sir. I mean, to the extent of being annoying, and so we had a different outlook of the real Air Force. They were still in the class Air Force. So.
Did you find that the male students were purposely hateful towards yourself and the other ladies?
It wasn't visible, but I can tell you we had a graduation party without the guys because they had a graduation party, excuse me, without the ladies, and they purposely left us out. So, and they were jealous. I mean, we were getting all the attention, and so I can understand that from a group of young men. I mean, macho guys, you know, to have that happen to them, that probably was a little bit of a stickler for them. But hate, no, I wouldn't go as far as hate, you know. In fact, there's some guys went to pilot training that I think probably passed because we all passed. Okay, somebody in the other class, I heard there were some people in our class and somebody else's class that probably self-eliminated, but I don't recall who it was. Okay, but one guy, we used to joke because we called him Cookie, okay, because every time he flew, he got sick, and he barfed in a bag and he brought it back, but he passed. Okay, he made it through the class. I would think that would be a deciding factor in my book, but not so much, I guess.
Did you have a call sign?
Oh, not particularly, no. I don't recall any particular call sign except for the 4-ship formation that the girls had, which was Hot Lips. MASH was popular back then.
Were you part of Hot Lips?
Yes.
Why were the female students required to attend pilot screening prior to starting class with their male peers?
Well, those males were all academy guys. Okay, our peers in our class were all academy guys. They already had all that training. They had it at the academy. Now, I think it was required of OTS people at the time anyway, because those are the people we were meeting down at Hondo. These are guys that came from college or not an OTS program, but they joined after graduating from college. And they got accepted into the pilot program, so they had to be tested as well. So I think it was just a standard test, quite honestly. I never thought it was anything out of the ordinary for us being down there. They just had to have all the data, you know, they were collecting data. So.
Do you think the acceptance of female aviators during the 1970s was symbolic of changes in America?
I'm trying to remember. I looked at that question. I go, what happened in the 1970s? You know, I was trying to think.
I wrote that question after I read part of Jess Brown's thesis, and it was equal rights amendment was a huge deal during the 70s.
Okay, so well, okay, I didn't see it as changes as I guess the Equal Rights Amendment would have been a pretty important thing. So that's probably a good correlation, maybe so. But you know, the Navy had pilots before then. I'm not even sure, but maybe the Coast Guard did too. I'm not really sure. You might check some, but maybe it was just the Navy, because the Navy and Coast Guard are pretty close. But in any case, I met some of those I met Chris Giza down at Atlanta one time we were going to a conference down there. It's a women in aviation type conference or something. But anyway, they got what, a year ahead of us, I think, 2 years maybe. Check that out for me.
I think the Navy started flying in 72 or 73, maybe.
Okay, so maybe it was 3 or 4 years before, or well, We were 76, 77. So yeah, quite a few years before us.
Just a couple.
You would think
What
they would have been enough to convince everybody that it was possible.
Probably.
If they'd have looked.
What aircraft did you fly during your career?
C-9 Airvac and the 141.
And then when you separated, you flew,
I was flying the 141 at that time.
and when you were a civilian though, what did you fly?
Went right into the DC-9 for Continental, and then we went to the MD-80, and then I went from the MD-80 to the 777, Boeing 777, and ended my career as a captain on the 777 flying to China. You want another joke? Okay, I jokingly tell people that I'm a pole dancer, a retired pole dancer. All right, this is strictly humorous only because when we took off in Newark, we would go either to the left or the right side of the North Pole to get to Hong Kong, Beijing, Shanghai, or in that area of the world. It usually pops a few eyes, so it's my personal joke.
If women had not been limited to flight instructors and transport and cargo pilots, what aircraft would you have chosen?
I probably at that time was still wanting to be an astronaut, so I would have definitely tried for a fighter or something with supersonic capability. Okay, the only boomer I'd ever had was in the T-38. So at that time, high-speed aircraft, test pilot type stuff, that was one of the things on the checklist. So when I checked out test pilot and went over to Edwards and met a few test pilots, I said, that's okay. I don't think I want to do this. That was part of the thing, And so refresh my memory on the question, I guess.
What aircraft would you have chosen if you hadn't been limited?
Well, the limitations were there. I would have tried to get a fighter pilot just to see if I could do that, so, but everything works out for the best, I had a good career overall. I made the decision not to pursue astronaut anymore because I didn't want to get another degree in something scientific. I was, it was just a personal decision on my part. So I think, like I said, everything works out for the best. I made the most of it. I made the most of the rest of the career. So,
did you ever have regret not being able to fly combat aircraft?
That would be part of it, just because combat aircraft are the ones that are high speed. And in fact, they opened up combat aircraft a year after I retired. I left the Air Force. I think it was 84, 85, somewhere in there, maybe even 86 time frame. But yeah, they opened it up. In fact, that was another thing that happened that time, was I was flying the 141, and they told me, they had me go up and do co-piloting trip on a refueling flight. Okay, so we were training how to fly in the worst turbulence that we could think of, because the co-pilot brings the airplane within a certain distance to the tanker. Well, that's the most turbulent area. The co-pilot does all the hard work. And then once you get past that little bubble from the stuff that's coming off of the tanker turbulence, then it's an easy glide into the tanker spigot. That's what everybody had told me, but they wouldn't let me get out of the turbulence. I said, well, let me go to, this is fun. I enjoyed getting into there to that position. I said, and it was challenging, and I like challenges in my life. So I said, well, I like to go to refueling school. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that. Only people who fly combat can do that. Oh, just the 145 ones that fly airdrop need to be qualified. So since we didn't fly airdrop, we couldn't do that. So So that was another, it was all about the same time.
Was your status as one of the first Air Force female pilots well known throughout your career?
No, no, it wasn't. And they had to squeeze it out of me sometimes. You know, or somebody had already met me and I might have mentioned it somewhere and they go, oh, do you know that Chris is this, Chris is that? And, you know, no, come on, be quiet. It's not a big deal.
So I guess it had no impact on your career later on.
Well, the only impact it had on me was when I applied for a commercial job and went to the interview. We sat around the table talking about our military careers, okay, and what we did and how I did it and everything like that. And they told me I was hired before I didn't even ask any really critical questions that I thought I had to prepare for, like who's the CEO and all that kind of stuff, you know. And we just talked about our military time. We're laughing, joking around at the table. And I walked out of there, and probably the only time I wore heels and a pantsuit that with heels. And some little upstart pilot sitting against the wall says, I bet she got hired. And I walked up to him and I said, yes, I did. I have 3,500 hours of jet time. What do you have? And he shut his little mouth. He goes, none. And then walked out.
That's incredible.
So
Did becoming one of the first Air Force female pilots open other opportunities in your career?
like that probably opened up the commercial opportunities. So
Right.
yes, to a great extent.
How do you think your success impacted other women?
You know, I never thought of it as impacting other women until I started going to the Women in Aviation conferences. And Kathy Rambo / Kosan will talk a lot about that probably because that is her big thing. They started that military women military aviators aspect of the Women in Aviation. So, and we would have a flight suit party every Friday night, and you would stand around and they would introduce you, you know, in some cases, or the word got out that over there, she's the first, you know, in the first class and all that kind of stuff, kind of like Kathy and everything else. And the conversation would start, and these ladies would just come up and go, thank you, thank you, thank you for opening it up for us. I said, I just did what I wanted to do. You know, so it's kind of, it's humiliating, you know, but.
Since you were involved in breaking the barrier for female Air Force pilots, did you break any other barriers during your career?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I mean, let me see what I wrote on my question here. Like I said, every time I go to those WAI coins, they go, oh, thank you for what you did. You opened it up and everything like that. And I just kind of go, okay. Some of my, I wrote down that most of my commercial career had a few firsts, but firsts are like, can't even describe what they'd be like, but in a situation where you have a first, let's say, for example, okay, I was the first aircraft commander of the DC-9 in the Air Force. So in the Air Force, you got to add in the Air Force. So there's a lot of caveats in that whole first, okay. First all-female crew 777 at Continental or at United or at this, you know. So they have caveats there that really have just meaning within the company itself, you know, not so much meaning within the world aspect. So in that case, that's how I look at some firsts. So
What message would you like to give young women considering a career in the Air Force?
Go for it. Do it. Dream big dreams, then live them. Live them to the best of your ability. Now, don't let anyone tell you no. If that's what you want, don't let them tell you no. Go somewhere else. Find another avenue. Do work around. That's what you do. If you can't get past that log jam that's up on that road, you go around and you go around another road, but you still get to your destination. That's what I would tell them. Go get to your destination, and don't be afraid to change your destination, but own it.
Do you have any other message you would like to give, or any other stories you'd like to share at this time?
Oh, yeah, I've got one with Susan. Okay, Susan and I are flying across Texas in the DC-9. Okay, and we're talking on the radio, like Susan's talking on the radio, and I'm on that particular mission, I was the captain, she was my first officer. Well, those are civilian things. I was the aircraft commander and she was the co-pilot. But in any case, we're going across, and all of a sudden someone says, the air traffic controller comes over and goes, "Gentlemen, this is Texas," or whatever. I can't even remember the information that he was trying to tell us. But the next thing, I picked up the mic and said, "Be advised, there's 2 women in this airplane." And within seconds, didn't you guys read the NOTAMs? You know, I mean, I want vectors away from that aircraft from the guys, okay? You know, and then I would come back. Didn't you read your NOTAMs? You should have read your NOTAMs. You should have known we were out here. And so notices to airmen is a NOTAM. So we were joking in the airplane with that. And Susan and I both told them 2 women in here.